The sound of the shovel hitting against something solid echoed through the abandoned chapel of St. Mary, as gravedigger Frank Rodriguez removed debris from the deteriorated foundations. It was June 2023, exactly 8 years after the church had been closed, following the most mysterious disappearance in Millbrook's history. What Frank discovered buried in the foundations of the old chapel were not just stones and mortar. They were the mortal remains of Isabella Martinez, the bride, who had disappeared 1 hour before her wedding at that very location. Along with the bones, Frank found fragments of the wedding dress that Isabella would have worn to marry Michael Thompson, the engagement ring that had cost the groom 2 years of savings, and evidence that would finally reveal the terrible truth about what happened on that fateful morning in June 2015. If you are new to our channel, make sure to subscribe and activate notifications, because today's case will show you how one of the happiest days in a person's life can transform into the darkest family nightmare, and how secrets can remain buried literally beneath our feet for years. This is the story of a radiant bride who was minutes away from fulfilling her lifelong dream of marrying the love of her life, of a wedding that transformed into tragedy when the protagonist simply disappeared, and of a community that lived 8 years wondering whether Isabella Martinez had fled from the altar or become a victim of something much more sinister. What really happened to Isabella Martinez on the morning of her wedding? Why would a woman in love disappear moments before saying yes to the man she loved? And what dark secrets were hidden in the foundations of the very church where she was supposed to have been married? The answers will shock you. But first, you need to know exactly who Isabella Martinez was, because understanding her love story and her dreams is the only way to comprehend the magnitude of the tragedy that befell her on the day that should have been the happiest of her life. Isabella Martinez was the type of woman who made people believe in fairy tales, and at 27 years old, she was about to live her own happy ending with the dream wedding she had planned since childhood. At 5 feet 5 inches tall, with wavy brown hair that shone like silk in the sun, and green eyes that seemed to capture all the joy in the world, Isabella had that natural and authentic beauty that came from within. As a registered nurse at Millbrook Memorial Hospital, Isabella dedicated her life to caring for others with genuine compassion that touched everyone who knew her. She worked primarily in the pediatric ward, where her warm personality and contagious smile worked miracles in the recovery of hospitalized children. Isabella had this special gift with children, recalls Dr. Patricia Chen, head of pediatrics where Isabella had worked for 5 years. She could make a crying child stop crying just with her presence. Parents always specifically requested that Isabella care for their children because they knew they would be in loving hands. The love story between Isabella and Michael Thompson had begun in the most romantic way possible. They met when Michael, a 29-year-old carpenter, was hospitalized after a work accident in 2012. Isabella was the nurse assigned to care for him during the 3 days of hospitalization, and what began as professional medical care quickly blossomed into a special connection. "I fell in love with Isabella before I even knew her name," Michael recalls with a melancholic smile. "She had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world. Even with pain and worried about my work, when Isabella entered the room, everything got better." Michael had proposed to Isabella in December 2013, in an elaborate proposal that involved the entire pediatric ward of the Easyway Hospital. He had conspired with Dr. Chen to decorate the nursing station with hundreds of Christmas lights and have the patient children hold signs that, together, said, "Isabella, will you marry me?" When Isabella arrived for the night shift and saw the surprise, She cried with emotion before saying yes. "It was the most beautiful proposal I had ever seen in my life," recalls Sarah Johnson, Isabella's best friend and maid of honor. Isabella always said she wanted Michael to propose to her in a place that meant something to them, and there was no more perfect place than the hospital where they met. The couple had chosen June 2015 for the wedding because it was when Isabella would complete 3 years of work at the hospital, an important milestone she wanted to celebrate along with her new beginning as a wife. They spent 18 months planning every detail of the ceremony and reception, from choosing the historic St. Mary Chapel to the dinner menu. Isabella had dreamed of her wedding dress since childhood, and when she found the perfect model in a boutique in Sacramento, an ivory satin dress with delicate embroidery and a 2-meter train, she immediately knew it was the dress. Michael worked overtime for 6 months to pay for the dress and all other wedding expenses. Isabella would glow every time she talked about the wedding, remembers her mother, Carmen Martinez. She had notebooks full of magazine clippings, spreadsheets with schedules, guest lists, organized by colors. She was living her childhood dream. The Martinez family had immigrated from Mexico when Isabella was a child, and her parents, Carmen and Roberto, had worked hard to give their children a better life. Isabella was the youngest of 3 siblings and was the pride of the family, the first to graduate from college, the first to have a stable career, and now would be the first to get married. "Isabella was always our little princess," Roberto Martinez recalls with emotion. "When she was born, I promised that one day she would have the most beautiful wedding in the world. Seeing her planning this wedding, so happy and in love, was the fulfillment of my dreams as a father." Isabella's personality was a perfect combination of professional determination and personal sweetness. At work, she was known for competence, punctuality, and tireless dedication to patients. At home, she was the loving daughter who called her parents every day, the sister who remembered all birthdays, and the girlfriend who made sure to prepare Michael's favorite dinner every Friday. Isabella was one of those rare people who could be successful in her career without losing femininity and sweetness, observes Linda Wilson, nursing supervisor. She was ambitious and professional, but also was the first to offer help when someone needed it, the first to organize birthday parties for colleagues. Isabella's social circle revolved mainly around the hospital, the church she had attended since childhood, and the group of friends from nursing college. She was maid of honor at 3 weddings and godmother to 8 children. Her friends always said that Isabella was the type of person who made everyone feel special. Isabella remembered everyone's birthday, always had a handwritten card, always asked about your family, recalls Jennifer Hayes, college classmate. She was genuinely interested in people's lives. When you were with Isabella, you felt loved. The relationship between Isabella and Michael was admired by everyone who knew them. They were one of those couples who seemed to have come out of a romantic movie. He tall and strong, working with his hands to build beautiful things. She delicate and careful, dedicating her life to healing people. They complemented each other perfectly. They were soulmates in the truest sense of the word, observes Pastor Williams, who would conduct the ceremony at St. Mary Chapel. When they were together, you could see love radiating from them. Michael looked at Isabella as if she were the most precious thing in the world, and she looked at him with total devotion and admiration. The wedding preparations had been a period of pure happiness for Isabella. She loved every aspect of planning, from choosing flowers for the bouquet to tasting different cake flavors. Michael joked that Isabella had become a wedding specialist in the process. The choice of St. Mary Chapel had been especially significant for the couple. The historic church, built in 1892, was where Isabella's grandparents had married in 1954. The small stone chapel, with its colorful stained glass windows and carved wooden altar, represented tradition, family, and faith, fundamental values for Isabella. Isabella always said she wanted to get married in the same church as her grandmother. Carmen Martinez remembers. She said she wanted her grandmother's spirit to be present on the most important day of her life. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Isabella was radiant with happiness. Colleagues at the hospital commented on how she seemed to float through the corridors, always smiling, always talking about the latest wedding details. She had taken 2 weeks off for the honeymoon in Hawaii. The first time in 5 years she would take more than 3 consecutive days of vacation. Isabella was happier than I had ever seen any person, Dr. Chen observes. She worked until the last day before the wedding, and even being obviously nervous and excited, she maintained her professionalism and care for patients. She was living a dream. The bachelorette party had happened 2 weeks before the wedding, in an intimate party at Sarah Johnson's house, with the 10 bridesmaids and closest friends. Isabella had laughed until she cried, had opened sentimental gifts, and had talked about how excited she was to start her new life as a wife. At the bachelorette party, Isabella wouldn't stop talking about how excited she was to wake up every day next to Michael, Sarah recalls. She said she finally understood what it meant to find your soulmate. On the night before the wedding, Isabella had dined with her family at a Mexican restaurant they had frequented since her childhood. She was calm, happy, and full of anticipation for the big day. Her last words to her parents before going to the hotel where she would stay with the bridesmaids were, "Tomorrow, I'm going to become the happiest woman in the world." Isabella went to sleep smiling, Carmen Martinez remembers from the last night with her daughter. "She kissed my face and said she could barely wait to see me at church in the morning. There was absolutely nothing that indicated any concern or fear." The 14th of June 2015 should have been the happiest day of Isabella Martinez's life. Instead, it became the day she disappeared without a trace, creating a mystery that would torment her family, her fiancé, and the entire community for the next 8 years. No one could imagine that the answer to her disappearance was buried literally beneath the feet of everyone who searched for her. The morning of June 14th, 2015 dawned perfect for a wedding, with blue sky without clouds and mild temperature of 22 degrees, exactly the type of weather Isabella had dreamed of for her big day. At the Grand Vista Hotel, where Isabella had spent the night with her 10 bridesmaids, the bridal suite was in effervescence since 6 in the morning. Isabella woke up singing, remembers Sarah Johnson, maid of honor who slept in the same room as the bride. She jumped out of bed at 6 in the morning, opened the curtains, and said, "It's today. It's the most important day of my life." She was radiant with happiness. The first activity of the day was the special breakfast that Isabella had ordered for all the bridesmaids: fresh fruits, pastries, natural juices, and champagne for a morning toast. Isabella barely touched the food, not from nervousness, but from pure excitement. She wouldn't stop talking about how anxious she was to see Michael at the altar. Isabella was nervous, but it was that good nervousness of a bride, explains Jennifer Martinez, Isabella's cousin and one of the bridesmaids. She laughed at everything, made jokes, and every few minutes said something like, "Girls, I'm getting married today," as if she couldn't believe it. At 9 in the morning, the beauty team that Isabella had hired arrived: a hairstylist, a makeup artist, and a manicurist. Isabella had done several hair and makeup tests in the previous months and knew exactly how she wanted to look. hair pulled back in an elegant bun with loose strands framing her face, natural makeup that would enhance her green eyes, and classic French nails. Isabella was so excited during the preparation, remembers Maria Santos, the hairstylist. She wouldn't stop talking about Michael, about the honeymoon, about plans for the future. She said she wanted to have 3 children and had already chosen the names. It was impossible not to be infected by her happiness. During the makeup and hair process, which lasted 2 hours, Isabella called Michael several times, who was getting ready at his parents' house, to exchange loving words and confirm last-minute details. In the last call, at 11 in the morning, she told him, "I love you more than anything in the world. I can't wait to be your wife." Isabella was literally glowing, observes Ana Rodriguez, the makeup artist. "I work with brides for 15 years, and I never saw a woman happier and more confident than Isabella that morning. She was 100% sure she was doing the right thing." At 11:30, the time came for Isabella to put on her wedding dress. The dress had been kept in a special cover in the suite closet, and when the bridesmaids carefully removed it, everyone was moved to see how perfect it was. Isabella had lost 3 kilograms in the last months to ensure the dress would fit impeccably. When Isabella put on that dress, she transformed into a fairy tale princess. Sarah Johnson recalls through tears. "All of us started crying because she was absolutely stunning. She looked at herself in the mirror and said, 'This is how I always dreamed it would be.'" The process of dressing Isabella lasted 45 minutes, with each detail being carefully adjusted. The 3-meter veil was positioned perfectly. The low-heeled shoes she had chosen for comfort were gently put on, and her jewelry, pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother and a simple diamond necklace that Michael had given her, were placed last. At 12:15, Isabella was completely ready. The bridesmaids took hundreds of photos, and Isabella wouldn't stop smiling and turning to show the dress. She looked like a porcelain doll, perfect and radiant. "I will never forget how beautiful Isabella was at that moment," Jennifer Martinez remembers. "She seemed to be glowing from the inside out. All of us knew we were seeing something special, a magical moment." At 12:30, Isabella said she wanted a few minutes alone to calm down and mentally prepare before leaving for the church. The bridesmaids respected her request and went to the hotel lobby to finalize arrangements for the cars that would take them to St. Mary Chapel. Isabella said she wanted a moment to thank God and mentally prepare for the wedding, Sarah explains. She always did this before important moments, took a few minutes to pray and organize her thoughts. It was during these minutes alone, between 12:30 and 12:45, that Isabella Martinez disappeared. When the bridesmaids returned to the suite to get her, they found the door open, but Isabella was nowhere to be found. "First we thought she had gone down to meet us," Sarah recounts those moments of confusion. "We searched throughout the hotel, lobby, restaurant, gardens, parking lot. Isabella had simply disappeared." The wedding dress was found carefully hung in the closet, as if Isabella had removed it carefully so as not to wrinkle it. Her jewelry was organized on the vanity, her shoes aligned beside the bed. But Isabella, wearing only lingerie and a hotel robe, had disappeared without leaving any clue. It was surreal. Jennifer Martinez remembers, "It was as if Isabella had evaporated. It didn't make any sense. She was radiant, talking about how anxious she was to get married, and suddenly she simply wasn't there anymore." At 1 in the afternoon, 1 hour before the ceremony scheduled for 2 o'clock, Sarah Johnson desperately called Michael to inform him that Isabella had disappeared. Michael initially thought it was a bad joke, but when he realized that Sarah was crying, he ran to the hotel. When Michael arrived at the hotel and saw that Isabella really wasn't there, he was devastated. Sarah recalls. He started screaming her name through the corridors, searching on every floor. It was heartbreaking. At 1:15, with the ceremony scheduled to begin in 45 minutes, Michael made the most difficult decision of his life. He called Pastor Williams to inform him that the wedding would have to be canceled because the bride had disappeared. At St. Mary Chapel, 150 guests were already seated awaiting the ceremony. The church was decorated with white and pink flowers, exactly as Isabella had dreamed. The altar was prepared, the organist was ready, and everyone was anxiously waiting to see the bride enter. Having to announce to a church full of people that the bride had disappeared was one of the most difficult things I ever had to do, Pastor Williams recalls. There was absolute silence, then screams of shock, then crying. No one could believe it. The Martinez family arrived at the church at 1:30, not knowing that Isabella had disappeared. Carmen Martinez was radiant, wearing the pink dress they had chosen together for the mother of the bride. Roberto Martinez was proud in his new suit. When Michael met them at the church door and explained the situation, Carmen collapsed in tears. My first reaction was to deny. Carmen Martinez remembers that terrible moment. I told Michael that this was impossible, that Isabella would never do such a thing. I was sure there was some misunderstanding. At 2 o'clock, the scheduled time for the ceremony to begin, the Millbrook police were officially notified of Isabella Martinez's disappearance. Officer David Wilson was the first to respond, arriving at the hotel at 2:15 to begin the investigation. When I arrived at the hotel, the scene was total chaos, Officer Wilson recalls. There were 10 women in bridesmaid dresses crying, a desperate groom still in a tuxedo, and a family in complete shock. I had never seen anything like it. The initial investigation focused on determining whether Isabella had left the hotel voluntarily or had been taken against her will. The hotel's security cameras were immediately reviewed, but revealed something disturbing. There was no record of Isabella leaving the hotel. The cameras showed Isabella entering the suite with the bridesmaids the night before, but there was no image of her leaving, explains Detective Martinez, who took over the case the next day. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. A complete search of the hotel was conducted, including all rooms, service areas, parking lots, and gardens. Search dogs were brought to track Isabella's scent, but found no trail leading outside the building. The dogs could follow Isabella's scent inside the hotel, but completely lost the trail in the corridor near the suite, Officer Wilson explains. It was as if she had simply disappeared from that corridor. While police conducted the search at the hotel, Michael Thompson was in indescribable agony. The man who should have been celebrating the happiest day of his life was being questioned about his fiancée's disappearance. The police questions, although necessary, were like stabs in the heart. They asked me if Isabella and I had fought, if she had expressed doubts about the wedding, if there was any financial or family problem, Michael recalls with pain. I understood they had to ask, but each question was torture, because the answer was always the same. Isabella was happy. We were happy. She wanted to get married. The bridesmaids were interviewed one by one about the last moments with Isabella. All confirmed that she was radiant, excited, and completely committed to the wedding. There was no indication that she was considering running away or that anything was worrying her. Isabella spent the entire morning talking about how happy she was. Jennifer Martinez told investigators, "She showed no hesitation, no doubt. She was living her dream." As the day progressed, without any clue about Isabella's whereabouts, reality began to set in. A bride had completely disappeared 1 hour before her wedding, without leaving any evidence of how or why. It was the beginning of a mystery that would torment everyone involved for the next 8 years. St. Mary Chapel, which should have been the stage for the happiest celebration of Isabella Martinez's life, became the symbol of an inexplicable tragedy. The flowers that should have framed her walk to the altar wilted while police searched for clues. The altar where she should have said yes remained empty, keeping secrets that would only be revealed 8 years later, when a gravedigger would discover that Isabella had never really left that church. For 8 long years, the disappearance of Isabella Martinez haunted the small town of Millbrook like a wound that refused to heal. What should have been the community's most joyful celebration transformed into the most inexplicable tragedy, leaving trails of pain and unanswered questions that deeply affected everyone who knew and loved Isabella. Michael Thompson never fully recovered from the trauma. The man who should have started his honeymoon in Hawaii spent weeks desperately searching for his missing bride. He hired private detectives, traveled to other cities following false leads, and never stopped believing that one day Isabella would come home. The first months were the worst, Michael recalls with a choked voice. "I woke up every day hoping it was a nightmare, that Isabella would be in the kitchen making coffee like she always did. When reality hit, it was like dying a little every day." Michael kept the apartment he had shared with Isabella exactly as she had left it. Her clothes remained in the closet, beauty products on the vanity. Even the last shopping list she had written was still stuck on the refrigerator. He refused to accept that she wouldn't come back. "Everyone told me to move on." But how do you move on when the person you love disappears on your wedding day? Michael questions. "I didn't know if she was alive or dead, if she had run away, or if something terrible had happened. How do you process that?" The Martinez family plunged into a spiral of guilt and despair. Carmen Martinez developed severe depression and needed to be medicated for years. Roberto Martinez left his job to dedicate himself entirely to searching for his daughter, spending all the family's savings hiring investigators and offering rewards for information. Roberto, aged 20 years in those first months, Carmen observes about her husband, "He felt responsible for not having protected our daughter. As a traditional Mexican father, he thought it was his duty to keep the family safe, and when Isabella disappeared, it was as if he had failed." Isabella's brothers, Carlos and Miguel Martinez, dealt with the tragedy in different ways. Carlos, the oldest, became obsessive about searching for clues, creating elaborate theories about what could have happened. Miguel, the middle one, tried to be the strong son who kept the family together, but internally was falling apart. Every birthday of Isabella's, every Christmas, every family holiday was torture, Miguel explains. There was always an empty chair, someone was always missing. The house was never the same without her laughter. The official investigation produced few concrete clues in the first years. Detective Martinez and his team followed hundreds of leads, investigated theories about kidnapping, human trafficking, murder, and even the possibility of Isabella having assumed a new identity. All paths led to dead ends. The Isabella Martinez case haunted me throughout my entire career, Detective Martinez admits. We investigated every possible angle. We checked bank records, phone calls, security cameras throughout the city. It was as if she had simply evaporated. One of the most investigated theories was the possibility of Isabella having suffered a psychotic episode or amnesia, common in cases of extreme pre-wedding stress. Psychologists were consulted, and although they admitted that wedding stress could cause unusual behaviors, all agreed that it was highly unlikely that Isabella had run away voluntarily. Isabella showed no signs of extreme anxiety or doubts about the wedding, explains Dr. Patricia Chen, who was consulted about the case. She was genuinely happy and excited. The idea that she fled from the altar doesn't hold up psychologically. During the following years, there were several moments when the family thought they would finally have answers. In 2017, a woman with similar appearance to Isabella was seen working in a store in Oregon, but investigation confirmed it was another person. In 2019, human remains were found in a forest 100 kilometers from Millbrook, but DNA tests confirmed they were not Isabella's. Each false alarm was devastating, Carmen Martinez explains. For a moment, you think, finally, we're going to know the truth. And then they discover it's not her. You feel relieved for that family that found answers, but devastated because you're still in the dark. St. Mary Chapel, where Isabella should have been married, became a place of pilgrimage for family and friends. They visited regularly, placing flowers on the altar and praying for answers. The church began to attract curious people and enthusiasts of unsolved mysteries, becoming a morbid attraction. The church became a symbol of hope and despair at the same time, Pastor Williams observes. The family came to pray for Isabella, but there were also people who came just out of curiosity about the mystery. It was heartbreaking. As the years passed, attendance at St. Mary Chapel gradually decreased. The congregation was small and aging, and donations decreased significantly after the church became associated with Isabella's disappearance. In 2018, 3 years after the incident, the church was officially closed due to structural problems and lack of funds. Closing St. Mary was like closing a painful chapter, Pastor Williams, who retired after the closure, explains. But it was also sad because that church had so much history, so many happy memories before what happened to Isabella. The town of Millbrook developed various urban theories about Isabella's disappearance. Some people believed she had been kidnapped by traffickers. Others thought she had fled to start a new life, and there were even supernatural theories about ghosts or inexplicable phenomena. The case became part of local folklore, observes Mayor Jennifer Thompson. It was impossible to live in Millbrook and not know the story of the bride who disappeared. Parents used the story to teach children about safety, and tourists sometimes came specifically to see the church. Sarah Johnson, Isabella's maid of honor, never married. She said that after witnessing her best friend's disappearance, she developed a phobia of weddings. She moved from Millbrook in 2018, unable to continue living with the constant memories. Every time I passed by the hotel where Isabella disappeared, or by the church where she should have been married, I relived that terrible day, Sarah explains. I felt guilty for having left her alone, even if only for 15 minutes. It was a guilt I couldn't overcome. Memorial Hospital, where Isabella worked, created a scholarship in her name for nursing students. Every year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, a ceremony was held to honor her memory and her dedication to patients. But even these moments of remembrance were bittersweet. Isabella had so much life ahead of her, Dr. Chen reflects. She wanted to specialize in pediatric nursing, wanted to have children, wanted to make a difference in the world. Knowing that all these dreams were interrupted so mysteriously was devastating for all of us who knew her. In 2020, 5 years after the disappearance, Isabella's case was officially reclassified as a cold case. This meant there was no more active investigation, although the file remained technically open. For the Martinez family, this reclassification was another devastating blow. When they said they were no longer going to actively search for Isabella, it was as if they had given up on her, Roberto Martinez recalls with bitterness. I understood they had other cases, other crimes to solve. But for us, Isabella was still out, there somewhere. Michael Thompson finally sought therapy in 2021, 6 years after the disappearance. He had resisted for years, believing that accepting help would be like giving up on Isabella. But social isolation and depression had become unbearable. The therapist helped me understand that seeking help didn't mean giving up on Isabella, Michael explains. It meant taking care of my own mental health so I could continue strong in case she returned, or to process the loss in case we discovered she had died. St. Mary Chapel remained closed and progressively deteriorating since 2018. The roof began to leak, windows were broken by vandals, and vegetation grew around the structure. The city considered demolishing the building, but the Martinez family asked that it be preserved in case Isabella ever returned. That church was where Isabella should have started her new life, Carmen Martinez argued in city council meetings. As long as we didn't know what happened to her, the church needed to remain standing. In 2023, 8 years after Isabella's disappearance, the city finally decided that something needed to be done about St. Mary Chapel. The building was becoming a safety hazard, and there was pressure from residents to either restore or demolish the structure. The decision was to hire a contractor to assess whether the church could be saved. Frank Rodriguez, an experienced cemetery worker and contractor who had worked on restoration of old churches throughout California, was hired for the assessment of the structure. Frank had 43 years of experience working with old buildings and had developed a reputation for being thorough and respectful when dealing with historic properties. When they called me to assess St. Mary, I knew the story, Frank explains. Everyone in the region knew the story of the bride who disappeared. It was a big responsibility to work on a church with so much emotional significance. In June 2023, exactly 8 years after Isabella's disappearance, Frank began his assessment of the deteriorating chapel. He started with an external inspection, checking the foundation, walls, and roof structure. The building was in poor condition, but Frank believed it could be saved with significant restoration work. The church had good bones, Frank observes. The stone foundation was solid, and the main structure was intact. But there was extensive water, damage, and the foundation needed repair work. It was during this foundation assessment that Frank made the discovery that would finally answer all the questions that had haunted Millbrook for 8 years. While removing debris and old mortar from a section of the foundation behind the altar, his shovel struck something that definitely was not stone or dirt. First, I thought it was pipe or old construction material, Frank recalls, his voice still shaken by the memory. But when I cleared more, dirt away, I saw fabric, and then I saw what clearly were human bones. Frank immediately stopped digging and called 911. Within an hour, the area was cordoned off as a crime scene, and forensic teams from the state police were on their way. Detective Sarah Martinez, who had inherited Isabella's case when Detective Martinez retired, arrived at the scene at 3 p.m. When I saw the remains and the fabric, I immediately suspected that we had found Isabella, Detective Sarah Martinez explains. The location made sense. She had disappeared from a hotel that was only 2 miles from the church, and this was exactly where she should have been married. The forensic excavation took 2 full days. Along with human remains, investigators found fragments of a wedding dress that matched descriptions of the dress Isabella had chosen, jewelry that corresponded to the pieces she had planned to wear, and most significantly, a distinctive engagement ring that Michael had given her. The engagement ring was the smoking gun, Detective Martinez explains. It was a custom design that Michael had specifically made for Isabella. There was no doubt that these were her remains. DNA testing confirmed what everyone suspected. The remains found buried beneath St. Mary Chapel were indeed those of Isabella Martinez. But the forensic analysis revealed something shocking. Isabella hadn't just died. She had been murdered. The skull showed clear evidence of blunt force trauma, explains Dr. Robert Chen, medical examiner who conducted the autopsy. Isabella had been struck multiple times with a heavy object. This was definitely a homicide. The discovery sent shock waves through Millbrook and beyond. After 8 years of uncertainty, the family finally had answers. But not the answers they had hoped for. Isabella hadn't run away or started a new life somewhere else. She had been brutally murdered on what should have been the happiest day of her life. Learning that Isabella had been murdered was devastating, Carmen Martinez recalls through tears. Part of me always hoped that she was alive somewhere, that maybe she had lost her memory or been forced to stay away. Knowing that she died on her wedding day was heartbreaking. But the forensic evidence found with Isabella's remains provided crucial clues about her killer. Mixed with the remains were fibers from men's clothing that didn't belong to any of the wedding party, a distinctive button that forensics teams would trace to a specific brand of janitor's uniform, and most importantly, DNA evidence that would finally lead investigators to Isabella's murderer. The evidence painted a clear picture, Detective Martinez explains. Someone had attacked Isabella, murdered her, and then buried her remains beneath the very church where she was supposed to get married. The level of planning and cruelty involved was truly disturbing. The investigation revealed that Isabella's killer had been hiding in plain sight for 8 years. Someone who had access to the chapel knew about the wedding plans and had been able to operate without suspicion. The truth about who murdered Isabella Martinez and why would shock everyone who thought they knew the people in their community. Robert Thompson, a 54-year-old man who had worked as groundskeeper for various churches in the region, including St. Mary Chapel, became a prime suspect when forensic evidence from the crime scene matched items found in his possession. Thompson had been working at the chapel during the weeks leading up to Isabella's wedding, ostensibly preparing the grounds for the ceremony. Thompson had perfect access and opportunity, Detective Martinez explains. He knew the layout of the church, knew about the wedding plans, and had been working there legitimately during the time period when Isabella disappeared. The investigation revealed that Thompson had developed an obsession with Isabella after seeing her during several visits to the chapel for wedding planning. Witnesses recalled seeing him watching her during meetings with Pastor Williams, and there were reports of inappropriate comments he had made about the bride. Thompson apparently became fixated on Isabella, Detective Martinez continues. According to co-workers, he talked about her constantly after her visits to the church. He seemed to believe that she was somehow meant to be with him instead of Michael. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. DNA, found beneath Isabella's fingernails, matched Thompson's genetic profile. The button found with her remains came from a uniform Thompson wore, and hair fibers recovered from the burial site corresponded to Thompson's DNA. Isabella fought back, Dr. Chen explains grimly. The evidence shows that she tried to defend herself. She scratched her attacker, which is how we obtained DNA evidence that led us to Thompson. When confronted with the evidence, Thompson initially denied any involvement. But Faced with overwhelming forensic proof, he eventually confessed to murdering Isabella in a fit of rage when she rejected his advances on her wedding morning. Thompson claimed that he had approached Isabella to save her from making a mistake by marrying Michael, Detective Martinez explains. According to his confession, when she told him to leave her alone and threatened to call police, he struck her with a shovel he had been using for groundskeeping work. The confession revealed that Thompson had lured Isabella from the hotel under false pretenses, telling her that there was an emergency at the church regarding her wedding flowers. Trusting because he worked at the venue, Isabella had followed him, only to be attacked when she realized something was wrong. Thompson said that he never intended to kill her, Detective Martinez notes, though investigators believe this claim is questionable. He said that he just wanted to talk sense into her, but when she resisted, he lost control. After murdering Isabella, Thompson had buried her remains beneath the chapel foundation, believing that they would never be discovered. He then continued working at various churches throughout the region, carrying a secret that had destroyed multiple families. The most disturbing aspect was that Thompson continued his normal life for 8 years, Detective Martinez observes. He worked at other churches, interacted with other brides planning weddings, all while knowing that he had murdered Isabella on what should have been the happiest day of her life. Robert Thompson was arrested in November 2023 and charged with first-degree murder. The trial began in March 2024, exactly 9 years after Isabella's disappearance. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the jury took only 3 hours to find him guilty. Seeing Thompson in court was surreal, Michael Thompson, no relation to the killer, recalls. For 8 years, I had wondered who had taken Isabella from me. To see that it was just an ordinary-looking man who worked at churches was shocking. During the sentencing hearing, the Martinez family finally had the opportunity to confront Isabella's killer and tell him about the devastating impact his crime had on their lives. "You didn't just kill my daughter," Carmen Martinez told Thompson during her victim impact statement. "You killed our entire family. You stole 8 years of our lives with your lies, your silence, your cowardice. Isabella was going to be a wife, a mother, a healer. You took all of that away from her, and from us." Michael also spoke during the hearing, describing how Thompson's crime had destroyed his faith in love, marriage, and humanity itself. "You stole the woman I loved more than life itself," he told Thompson. "But you also stole my ability to trust, to love, to believe that good things can happen to good people." Robert Thompson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in May 2024. He never showed remorse during the trial and maintains that he was saving Isabella from making a mistake, demonstrating a complete lack of understanding about the magnitude of his crime. Thompson's complete lack of remorse was disturbing, prosecutor David Wilson explains. Even when faced with the devastation he had caused, he showed no empathy for Isabella's family or understanding of how evil his actions were. The discovery of Isabella's remains, finally, brought closure to her family, though the truth about her murder was more painful than the uncertainty they had endured for 8 years. Knowing that she had been killed by someone she trusted, in a place that should have been sacred, added layers of betrayal to their grief. In some ways, knowing was worse than not knowing, Miguel Martinez admits. When she was just missing, we could hope. Now we know that she suffered, that she was afraid, that she died in the most traumatic way possible. But the family also found a certain peace in finally being able to lay Isabella to rest properly. Her funeral was held in August 2024, with hundreds of people attending to honor the memory of a woman whose life had been cut tragically short. Finally, being able to say goodbye to Isabella was both devastating and healing. Carmen Martinez explains, "We could finally mourn her properly and celebrate the beautiful person she was, instead of living in uncertainty." St. Mary Chapel was eventually restored and rededicated as a memorial to Isabella and other victims of violence. A new stained glass window was installed in her honor, depicting a nurse angel watching over children, a tribute to her work in pediatrics and the dreams she never got to fulfill. Isabella's legacy lives on in the memorial. Pastor Williams, who returned for the rededication ceremony, explains, "The church that was once a symbol of tragedy has become a place of healing and remembrance." The Isabella Martinez Memorial Fund was established to provide scholarships for nursing students and support for families of missing persons. The fund also supports improved background checks for church employees and increased security measures for wedding venues. Isabella's death wasn't in vain if it prevents other families from experiencing what we went through, Roberto Martinez says. If her story helps protect other young women, then some good came from our tragedy. Today, the Martinez family continues to heal from the trauma of losing Isabella. They visit her grave regularly, still keeping her memory alive through stories, photographs, and the Memorial Fund. While the pain never completely goes away, they have found ways to honor her life and find meaning in their loss. Isabella was taken from us on what should have been the happiest day of her life, Carmen Martinez reflects. But the love we shared with her, the joy she brought to our lives, the good she did as a nurse, none of that can be taken away. That's her true legacy. Michael Thompson has slowly begun to rebuild his life, though he says he will never completely get over losing Isabella. He has returned to work as a carpenter and has even begun dating again, something he never thought would be possible. "Isabella would want me to be happy," Michael explains. "She wouldn't want me to spend the rest of my life mourning. Finding someone else doesn't mean I love Isabella any less. It means I'm honoring the love she taught me by sharing it with someone else." The story of Isabella Martinez serves as a powerful reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, disguised as normalcy and respectability. But it also demonstrates the power of persistence, love, and the refusal to give up when someone you care about goes missing. The small chapel in Millbrook that once was supposed to witness a joyful beginning became a crime scene, then a symbol of loss, and finally, a place of healing and remembrance. Isabella Martinez may have been stolen from her family on her wedding day, but her memory lives on in the hearts of those who loved her and in the lives of those helped by programs established in her name. The pink backpack that once carried Mia Garcia's dreams, the briefcase that held Sarah Thompson's evidence of corruption, the classroom floorboard that concealed a teacher's belongings, and now the chapel foundation that hid a bride's remains, all remind us that truth has a way of surfacing, even after years of darkness, and that justice, though delayed, can still be served. Isabella Martinez went to sleep the night before her wedding as a happy bride-to-be. She never got to wake up as a wife, never got to become a mother, never got to fulfill her dreams of healing children as a specialized nurse. But her story became a catalyst for change, a symbol of resilience, and a reminder that love endures even when life is cut tragically short.